record to this computer. I don't know, is it actually recording now?
Ooh, it asked for consent.
Oh,
That's kind of cool.
all right. So everybody give you. I
Otherwise,
don't.
you have to leave.
Yes. So still waiting. Is Jenny here yet?
She was in her office earlier. I can always pop down and
Might have to send you to go find her.
shall I go
'Cause
do
I
that?
do not see her yet. Jennifer, I'm going to make you also a panelist.
Okay, I'm gonna mute myself and
Okay. Jenny, where are you? All right. Just waiting for Jenny to log in. She hopefully didn't go to the GoToMeeting meeting. I did send her an update, but I didn't actually talk to her this morning. I know she's been really busy. So Kara, I'm also going to promote you to panelist, and we'll get started here. We are recording, so because I don't know how to actually, let me see if I can pause the recording. I can pause the recording. Hi, everybody. This is Joe Flick at the State Library, and we are starting about 10 minutes late because we had a few technical problems getting Zoom on, but welcome to everybody. Gosh, it looks, Jenny, like we have almost 50 people here online, so I'm going to just turn things over to you.
Great. Thanks, Joe, and thank you all for joining us. I also want to welcome Commissioner Bruce Newell, who has joined us in Amelia's Cube as well. And we are spacing our chairs in the 10 by 10 foot cube to allow for as much social distancing as possible. And this was obviously an effort in resiliency as we figured out solutions to our technical difficulties, just something that we have to practice at this time. Thank you all. I want to share some information and answers to some questions that we've been receiving here. But mostly I want to make this website chat a discussion about how we all can support one another and most importantly support our communities at this time. As I said in my email last week, this is really a time for libraries to step up and address the issues that we're finding in our own communities, be it issues of anxiety, issues of confusion, and resulting social isolation as we see more and more schools and libraries and places of worship and places of work closed for at least the next couple of weeks. Even though we may be getting direction to close our physical facilities, that doesn't mean that library services have to end with the closing of the door. And so I'm really anxious for us to have a good wide-ranging discussion about opportunities that we see to really lean in and help one another as we help our communities during this time. So the first thing I want to share with all of you is just a little update from the State Library about the services that we are offering here. And as most of you know, most of our staff who support library development actually don't live in Helena. They live around the state and work remotely from their own home offices. We just have a handful of staff who work here in Helena from the actual state library. And so we don't anticipate that there will be any disruption to our services to all of you during this period. We've been actively having staff test how they can hold remote meetings and continue to communicate with one another as well as with all of you. So even though you may be concerned that we might be inundated with these kinds of questions, please don't hold back. Please don't ask for services from us if you need them. We are here and we are ready to assist you during this time. Some of our other services that are more Helena-based should still continue again without disruption. All of our GIS services are continuing. We have staff who are now working from home and testing working from home. And so far that testing is going very, very well. So again, you should be able to lean on those services. The one most specific service that's Helena-based is our Talking Book Library services, which involves readers advisorship from our readers advisors to our patrons, and then also physical mailing of cartridges of our talking books. Our readers advisors are testing the ability to answer calls from home offices if that work becomes necessary. At this point, we have not been told to close our doors. There's no mandatory work from home requirements from the state. That may change. And so we're using this time to test how we can continue to provide that phone service while working remotely. Of course, if the doors were closed, that would mean that we would not be mailing cartridges to our patrons around the state. In that event, we do have the ability to provide access to our BARD services. That's the downloadable audio service that's available to Talking Book Library patrons. And our staff are well versed in providing training and support to Talking Book Library patrons who might need access to those kinds of materials. So if you work with Talking Book Library staff or you have patrons who are Talking Book Library patrons, please continue to direct them to our Talking Book Library for continued service. I want to stop and ask if there's any questions about services from the state library.
And actually, most of the comments in the chat box are just good morning and just trying to figure out Zoom navigation. And I'll just add in here that if you navigate your cursor toward the bottom of your Zoom screen, it should bring up some options for your microphone. And I'm not exactly sure what it looks like on your end, or you might need to navigate toward the top of the screen and look for a small tab up there. So let me know if you have any other questions, and my colleagues who are online, if you feel free to jump in the chat box and help suggest, because I'm sure my screen looks a little different to others.
There is a question from Connie about legislative hearings coming up this week. There were a couple of hearings that we were supposed to be involved in. All legislative meetings have been canceled at this time. So the Legislative Finance Committee subcommittee reviewing the House Bill 633, as well as the Education Interim Committee that was to hear a panel from the Montana Library Association about the impacts of state aid, have both been canceled. They have not yet been rescheduled. I know the earliest they may be scheduled is the third week of April, but no dates have been set at this time.
And a question about the courier, and is the courier still planning on doing deliveries? That's from Kit.
So I'm gonna start talking more about some specific services to libraries, and I'll answer that question as well. Kara is meeting with partner libraries this afternoon to talk about impacts to partner library services, including the courier. And so we're looking for direction from partner libraries on how putting a moratorium on courier services would impact your ability to provide services, as well as direction with regard to interlibrary loan. So again, that meeting is scheduled for this afternoon, and we'll look for more information from Kara and the partners about any changes to those kinds of services.
And from Nancy Ryan, I have some talking points for why the library should remain open. I would welcome more talking points, as I've already been fielding questions about this.
Thanks, Nancy. You know, I think from our perspective, based on the guidance that we are hearing, we want to limit to the extent possible any kind of exposure for our patrons. We have patrons of a wide variety of ages and different kinds of groups that might come in contact with people who might be more susceptible to concerns. So please be cognizant of your open spaces If you do decide to remain open, make sure that you're allowing for adequate space amongst your public access computers and that they are cleaned regularly. If you're still open, please make sure that you're using gloves and cleaning materials like wipes, alcohol-based wipes, to wipe down your materials so that we're not spreading the virus in those kinds of ways. I know that libraries are encouraging people to not linger in their libraries longer than necessary. Sounds like a lot of libraries are putting moratoriums on their face-to-face public programming. The CDC's guidance is to limit gatherings of more than 50 people, but I know others are being much more cautious and halting that kind of programming altogether.
This is Bruce. I've been trying to understand how long viruses will live on clean, dry surfaces like books. And this is all fresh territory for all of us, but it looks like the answer to that is probably somewhere between 3 and 6 days, with probably the prevalence of 3 days. One of the problems with books is, of course, with corporal books, is that even if we do a perfect job of wiping down the outside of the book, it's still full of pages. So if someone sneezed at page 67, and we open up the book and inhale deeply, we're exposing ourselves to whatever was in that sneeze. So so to me, this, until we understand it better, it seems to me like there are real unresolved issues in regards to circulating books. So and that's actually the least tricky part of it. I was ill last year. I had cancer, and I've kicked the cancer, and that's all good. But I've had asthma all my life. I'm kind of probably right in the crosshairs for, and I'm also nearly 70. So I'm probably in the crosshairs of being made ill by this. And I really applaud the Montana Library Association board last week for coming to the decision to not hold the annual conference, even though I'm going to miss a chance to talk to folks and to hear what they're having to say about life in general, but specifically about a number of state library initiatives, including the library standards. But having said that, these are weird times, and the life you may be saving by closing may be somebody like me.
So I know that many of you are getting guidance from your local officials about whether or not to close and when you should think about closing in the future. We want you to all be in good communication with your local health departments and your local officials. Boards do have the authority to determine whether or not to close, but there are some important considerations that you should make when making that decision. What services we might be able to continue and in what way. And to Nancy's point, even if we have to close our library facilities, that doesn't mean that library services have to end. Some of the other questions that you should think about are what that means for your employees. Do you have the ability to continue to pay your employees if they are working from home, or if they are not able to work and maybe furloughed? What kinds of technology resources might you need in order to help employees work from home? For example, here at the State Library, we have the ability for employees to remote into the state of Montana systems through Citrix and remote desktop options. We've opened up those options to all of our staff. We also make use of Office 365 products and have access to a webmail service so that that kind of work and communication doesn't have to be disrupted. We're looking at making sure that all staff have access to headphones and other kinds of technology that would allow them to communicate via computer chat and voice over IP phone systems. So those are the kinds of things that you might be wanting to look into and be testing at this point in time ahead of any kind of direction to remote, to close and or to offer remote services. The Montana Shared Catalog staff are available to assist you if you want to set up staff to work remotely and still have access to Montana Shared Catalog systems. And I know today Montana Shared Catalog staff have gotten a significant number of requests to share information about changes to library hours and closures through the enterprise system. So please continue to communicate with the Montana Shared Catalog staff about those specific kinds of needs. Just
So
a few.
Jenny, I
Go
just
ahead.
want to interrupt. So a lot of questions coming in about how to maybe disinfect books and maybe that plastic items like DVDs, CDs might be more at risk, and a question about using UV wands. I don't know that, are we going to look into any of that? Do you have any particular advice or suggestions? And then the other questions that are like, are you recommending that libraries actually close? What is the recommendation on that? So those two things are kind of the bulk of the questions that are coming in comments.
Thanks, Joe. We're providing information online about recommended cleaning procedures and information that we have available about the virus and how it may or may not linger on materials. Our practice here at the State Library right now, especially for our Talking Book Library cartridges as they come in, is to wear gloves, and we're wiping down those cartridges with alcohol-based wipes. Those are plastic cartridges. I think there is concern over the virus remaining on different kinds of book-like materials. The best place for information on how the virus might remain on different kinds of materials is available through the State Health Department and the CDC. So I don't want us to be providing specific guidance. I think it's in our best interest to turn to the officials on those kinds of matters. And I know that there's a link that's just been posted in the chat box to where we're gathering that kind of information.
And on when to close?
We are not specifically telling libraries when they should or should not close, because right now the virus has been very localized. What we're recommending is that you look to your county health departments on the impact in your local areas and the guidance you're getting from your local officials. But please also keep in mind who your patrons are. You know your patrons better than anybody. You know the kinds of populations you're serving. You know how those populations interact with others within your communities. So for example, if you offer programming that's specifically designed for seniors, you may want to think about canceling that kind of programming. You may want to think about discouraging families with young children if you know that they have grandparents in their households and that kind of thing. Really look to the guidance that we're getting about the spread of the virus and who is impacted as you think about your individual services to different kinds of people. But the state library doesn't have the authority to direct libraries to close in the way we saw the governor directing schools to close. So our best recommendation is for you to be in communication with your local officials, and most importantly, think about who your patrons are and the concern about virus spreading amongst those populations based on the kinds of programs that you offer.
And I would encourage you to talk with your board members and think exponential. I'm not, again, the state library can't tell your board what to do in this instance, but it's not a simple sort of linear passing of the virus from one person to another. It has an exponential growth. Those curves are quite a bit different looking than sort of a simple A to B, B to C, C to D. And just because you have a program for youth doesn't mean it's not going to get to seniors. So speaking personally, I think this is a time for an excess of caution.
And Connie makes a good point that there seems to be a lot of information from the CDC and local health authorities for health services, schools, and businesses, but they're not directly addressing libraries as a unique entity. So it is hard to know. Would you say, Jenny, that any recommendation for a school or a business would apply to a library?
I definitely think you want to be looking at what's happening in your communities in that regard.
She also does point out that commissioners don't understand our unique services. I feel like we're on our own.
That's likely true, and I would like to understand more of your unique services. The problem is we're librarians. We just want to help people, right? And we want to help people in an intimate, as friendly kind of manner as possible. The trouble is this is not a library problem. It's a public health problem, and we have to put on a different hat. So, so I would just encourage you, library directors and staff, to have a conversation with their boards, and as Jenny suggested, with their local health people or state health people, and make a decision not based upon library needs, sadly, but upon public health concerns.
Yeah, and another comment came in from Yvonne about their public health director advised us and the senior center to close because we are community gathering places. And so this is that, I'm assuming, Jenny, the best source for making that decision or getting information would be your local public health director?
Absolutely, Joe. Those
Yeah.
are the people we want you to be in closest conversation with.
A person also made a comment earlier in the chat that MACO was recommending that any meetings be limited to under 10 people. So I can't confirm that, but somebody pointed that out. Oh,
so
I guess not everybody is seeing Connie's comments, but sorry about that. I'm still, like I said, trying to figure out this Zoom thing. But I am trying to make sure that you guys get the gist of what's going on in the chat.
So let me talk just a little bit more about a few other services that we are exploring here. And is Suzanne on the phone? I've asked Suzanne to look into what online meeting platforms might be available to libraries for you to either hold meetings and programming remotely if necessary, or to have a platform and means if your staff are working remotely to continue to be in other.
Yes, yes, I'm
Suzanne is on the phone.
They're barking.
Suzanne, you want to
Yes.
talk about your research?
While we wait for the barking, so if you look in when you're posting in the chat, if you could just make sure that above the chat it says to panelists and attendees. I think what is happening is that some of the posts are going just to panelists, so that's something that our attendees actually have control over. All
Okay.
yours, Suzanne.
We've got a moment of silence. You know, somebody called me just a few minutes ago, and that set them off. So anyway, Jenny asked me to look into what are some of the options for conducting some of your business online. So, for example, meeting with people, maybe you know, having book groups continue to meet, story time, that kind of thing. So, you know, you notice with this, we're using Zoom. And Zoom has a couple of different, well, they have a number of different plans. One is they do have a free option that's always available to people. And so you can host up to 100 participants, but you're limited to 40 minutes on that. So, you know, you set up an account and you can invite people, but, you know, at 40 minutes, well, and actually they'll give you a little bit longer than that your first time, you know, because I've used this, I confess, to to try to get you to find it's a great service. But ordinarily, after 40 minutes, then you're cut off. Now, also, I have it on authority that you can always log off and log right back on again and continue your time. So there's cheat things available on that. Then the next plan up is called Pro, and that's $14.99 a month. So that might be worth looking into, at least for a couple months. You don't have to sign up for any of these things for long term. GoToMeeting, that you're probably also familiar with because we've used this at the State Library, and some of you used this other times along with us, because we offered you trial subscriptions for this. Unfortunately, we couldn't continue that, but they're currently offering something that they're calling a work from anywhere emergency remote work kit. And they say on their website, starting immediately, will provide critical frontline service workers, including eligible healthcare providers, educational institutions, municipalities, and nonprofit organizations, as well as any current LogMeIn customer, free organization-wide use of mini LogMeIn products for 3 months through the availability of emergency remote work kits. Now, I don't know, but I'm assuming libraries would qualify for this, so that might be worth looking into. Skype, some of you may be familiar with using Skype. That's a Microsoft product. They always have free conference calling, including meetings and video conferencing. Another one is Discord. If you have patrons, family members who are gamers, they're probably more familiar with this than most of us are, because it's a chat feature that also offers voice and video that gamers tend to use a lot. But it's available free to anyone, either via apps that you can download or through the browser. And then finally, option I will offer is one that we consultants have used in the past. We haven't used it a lot recently, but Google Hangouts is apparently still out there. Now, Google is always a little bit touchy with their things because you're never quite sure how long they're going to last. And Hangouts is one of those things that they call a whole bunch of different products, and some of which they're phasing out. And to be perfectly honest, it's been a little bit buggy for us in the past, but Laura and Pam and I used to use this on occasion for meetings. So it's also out there, might be worth a try. So I think it's probably a matter of finding something that you're comfortable with, a little bit of a learning curve. I think, Pam, Tracy, and I are certainly willing to work with you if you want to do some kind of tests with these things to see, to get up to speed with it. As you can see, we're just getting up to speed with some of these things like this kind of Zoom web conference. But if you want to try these out, we'd be willing to try them out with you and see how they work. And it's not as good as in person for these things, but it's better than not having any contact at all. And it gives people some options of getting together, and especially if they have webcams, you can do some video, and so kind of easing some of that isolation and enabling connections and still allowing you to do some of the business of the library. So I think that's all I have. If there's any questions.
Just that we'd like to get that list you've been working from and add it to our online resource so everybody can.
Yeah, I'll be sending it out to Wired, and then also we'll add it to our online resources. So it will be there. So you don't necessarily have to go looking for things again. Where was that she sent out?
We're going to try to gather that stuff together. And Tracy just posted a link to a newsletter that targets local and state government entities, and notes an article that might be of interest to everybody. Back to you, Jenny.
Thank you. And thanks, Suzanne, for doing that research. And as has been said, Suzanne will share that information via Wired, and then we'll also collect it with the information that Amelia is keeping here at the State Library with links to all of this kind of information. I think the article that Tracy just posted is important. We recognize that a lot of you are dealing with officials that have varying degrees of capacity, and you may or may not be receiving guidance from them. But they are the groups who have the official authority to direct how you implement your services. That said, I think you should be mindful of the kinds of guidance that's being shared around the country and planning for the eventuality that you may have to close your libraries, or at least you may have to close to the public and think about offering services remotely. A few other things I wanted to mention before we open things up for more discussion. We are working with the Department of Emergency Services to track what services are open and what services are closed. The counties are being asked to complete a survey that shares information about what services have been closed. I am going to share that survey link with just library directors, and we're going to ask library directors or your designees to complete that survey, and then all of that information will be mapped back to DES, and we're going to have a map available online that will show which libraries are open and which ones are closed. If the status of your services change, all you need to do is go back to that survey, open it up, and change the status of your library services. So library directors, look for that link from me. You may also get that same link from your local county officials. It is the same survey. We're not duplicating that kind of information. So if you get different direction from your county officials about completing the survey, please follow their local guidance. If you don't receive the survey or don't receive specific guidance from your local official, then we're asking you to please complete the survey that we send out to all of you.
There was a comment from Kit about wondering about whether Overdrive would be loosening any of their content access rules. Kara did respond in the chat, but for those of you who might be watching the recording, that Kara says she has not learned anything about content licensing changes, or not much, she says, but I've been talking with our account manager about how to prepare for an anticipated spike in Montana Library to Go usage, as people are more and more dependent on online books. And so there is, and Suzanne does also share a note from Overdrive that says they're in the process of assembling a series of digital content options to respond to the challenges that we're facing. The goal is to serve the maximum number of readers at the lowest cost per circ, of course. Of course, they would say that. So
I have asked Kara to work with the Montana Library to Go Executive Board to think about whether or not we need to make some changes to our different holds, thresholds, and other kinds of models through Montana Library to Go, and to get a cost estimate of what it might cost for us to provide some temporary increases in those kinds of services. So if you're a member of Montana Library to Go or on that board, please work with Kara and work with her as quickly as possible so that we can get some information, so that to the extent necessary, if we need to try to find some one-time only monies to help with that, we can. As I said, the services, to the extent possible, it's services like Montana Library to Go that can really address the concerns over social isolation that we may be experiencing. The other resource that we have available that we're really going to be promoting is our Montana Memory Project. There's a wealth of great community information there. Maybe it's collections that you haven't dug into recently. Jennifer Burnell is going to be working on a series of emails to you that you can then share with your patrons as a way to develop some community conversations around some of the really rich content that exists within the Montana Memory Project. So I hope you'll maybe take a little time and look at those materials as you have time. Watch for those emails from Jennifer, and again, use that service as a way to bridge the gap with social isolation that we may be experiencing in our own communities.
This is an opportunity for Montana libraries to really explore different service models and to explore different sort of partnerships with people, with organizations in our community. And frankly, I don't know what those are, but for example, wouldn't it, I mean, people are going to be lonely, and people are going to miss coming to the library for story time and et cetera, but it's not just kids that like being read to. So, you know, have any libraries considered talking to a local radio station and having one or more readings online, just kind of a story hour where someone reads a book. Now, there are issues with books that are still in copyright, but there are many books that are fabulous that are no longer in copyright that could be read. And it may be that some libraries just figure that publishers aren't going to take and prosecute anybody for reading to the public during this crisis. But at any rate, this kind of kills several birds with one stone. It allows libraries just to show their public that they're still alive. It provides kind of a new, to me, fun-sounding sort of service for the public. And you know, if we're sitting around not able to take and have our doors open, maybe we have the staff to actually do this kind of thing. And I know that librarians are often fabulous readers.
Well, I'd like to ask Connie to kind of jump in here because she had some things to share on that, Bruce. Connie, can you try talking?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Oh, I thought you said my kid was in here for about 10 minutes, and when you said my mic was open, I thought you really could hear everything that was going on.
No, I was just wanting to let you know I was going to call on you in a minute. And Gavin, I'm going to call on you, get you in here as well.
Well, we were brainstorming last week, and the stories on the radio came up, and we had that some of what Bruce was saying about copyright. We have some staff looking into it, but our assumption was to just go ahead with it and that we would not suffer repercussions for the goodwill that we're trying to build with it. We do have the youth services staff are ready and starting to record virtual story times that they will post. We have a yoga instructor on class, so she will post some content for people doing yoga. We also have book challenges in mind, a hashtag, Imagine If at Home, and some other things that we'll put into place. We also have a schedule for people to answer our email reference and reader's advisory from home. Now we've closed for 2 weeks, but the staff will come in tomorrow if they can, and we'll kind of develop these things more from behind the scenes. But if nothing else, if we all can't get together, the things that we will move with first are youth services online and the reference services online.
I think that sounds fantastic. Christine also made a chat in the chat box about doing story time on Facebook. We can do Facebook Live kinds of story times using Instagram and YouTube and podcasting options. You know, it's really an opportunity for us to take advantage of the technology that's available to us to continue library services in a little bit different way. Gavin, I know you have some information about the work going on in the Billings Public Library. Do you have a mic?
I don't see Gavin anymore. He was here earlier. I'm looking. Nope, I don't see him. Billings, maybe. Oh, maybe that. Let's try that. Gavin, try talking now. You may need to unmute yourself. Sorry. I can't seem to unmute him, so.
This isn't Gavin, this is Mary Kay. This is just what my computer is named. Sorry,
Okay.
Joanne.
That's all right.
Disappoint you.
You can talk too, Mary Kay.
I have not, we're learning here. have nothing really to add other than our library was closed today, and the Rosebud County Library was closed too.
There's a question from Janine about whether or not we know how many libraries are closed and which ones. We don't at this point, but as soon as we're able to get that survey out and get library directors completing it, we'll have a better sense of how many of them are actually closed. Susie is chatting about services to homeless people, and Susie, I'll be
Yeah,
interested
glad
to
you saw that.
interested to know what direction you might get from your local officials. We haven't heard anything yet about the need for maybe using some of our public buildings as homeless shelters or kind of emergency response centers, but we certainly may get that kind of guidance coming out of both our state and local officials.
Well, that's one of the reasons I wanted Gavin to talk, was that I know that he has been working with emergency response providers, and there was an article in the Gazette this morning that the library is going to be closed to the public, but that they'll be operating some childcare services for first responders and medical professionals.
Any other ideas that you have that you might share about how you're thinking about providing services during this time? Is anybody thinking about mail delivery or any other kinds of materials delivery?
Mitch Grady is saying that the bookmobile will probably make deliveries outside of its usual scope. And we're considering door to door in our community. And Connie is saying until they know what's the safe handling actually is. And imagine if they're kind of cutting back on all that. Kelly is saying that they are doing curbside pickup in Sydney. And Kit also thinking about it, but worried about transmitting germs on items. And then Jody Moore, I think it's important to note that Billings Public Library staff are not providing the child care services. It sounds like they're just providing the space. At least that's my take on the article. Yeah, that was my take too, Jody. Sorry if I wasn't clear about that. And they have processes in place to keep everybody healthy, but also allow healthcare workers to actually be able to go to work. And then Susie, is anyone being told that staff will be pulled to other essential services supporting IT or fiscal? I think in towns, that is likely. I think that's what's happening in Billings as well. I think Gavin told me that he may be assigned to some other responsibilities during the emergency response. And then let's see, we've got a couple other. Jennifer, let's see, I guess I'm getting a little bit behind here. Michelle, with mentioning of book pages and how they can carry germs, I'm a bit freaked out. Yes, we are currently open for checkouts and returns only, but that may change. Do you want to respond to that, Jenny?
You know, I think it is the materials that we're all concerned about. I think to the extent possible, if we have ways to share materials, you know, it's an open question, but I think we need to continue to remind everyone, if we are sharing physical materials, to try to keep them cleaned to the extent possible. Wear gloves and be sure to wash your hands and use hand sanitizers if you've been handling those kinds of materials, and remind our patrons to do the same if they're receiving books or other kinds of items from the libraries. We can certainly do our best to let them know that we're attempting to clean them, but in their own best interest, they should consider washing their hands and using hand sanitizers as they handle those kinds of materials.
And just a couple of, quite a few comments that are considering curbside pickup. and now partly reconsidering it. One, let's see, Jennifer saying, or was it, I'm trying to find the article, the note about one library is permitting people to use their computer one at a time. They have to schedule their time. That seems like, and then disinfecting, but that just keeping the social distancing in place. And Jody Moore, I would love if someone had the capacity to research disinfectant bombers and foggers to see what would be safe and effective for our collections in large areas. And Nancy, is it out of line to ask our computer people to wash their hands before usage? In a public health emergency? I wouldn't think that's out of line. What do you think, Jenny?
I wouldn't think at all, and I would definitely make sure you have hand sanitizer and cleaning wipes at your public computers as well. So I want to make sure that you're all aware of the state's emergency response website. It's COVID-19.mt.gov. And they have links to information about the current spread of the virus. Information will be available there about state and local government resources and whether they're open or closed. There's direct links to the Department of Public Health and Human Services for up-to-date information about the status of the virus in Montana. If you're getting inquiries from the general public, make sure to send them to those kinds of authoritative information sources. The state does have an email address. It's covid19info@mt.gov. That email address is also linked from this website. So if you're getting requests for information, this is your most authoritative source at the state scale for what's going on in the state of Montana. And then if you get any kind of media inquiries about the virus and you're not comfortable answering those kinds of media inquiries, the state also has a contact information officer through the Department of Public Health and Human Services. His name is John Ebelt, and his email address is jebelt, EBELT, @mt.gov.
And Susie, again from Great Falls, on computer usage, that they are requiring all users to have a guest pass, and each person is given a disinfectant wipe along with their pass, and they're only using 1/3 of their computers so that they can be adequately spaced apart.
Any other service examples that you want to think about or talk about?
And I can unmute anybody's microphone if you want to share something. Just say down in the chat box and I'll be happy to do that.
So I want to recap just a few things. Again, the state library really isn't in a position to direct libraries to close. That's a decision that has to be made at the local level by your local officials and your local library board. Please be mindful of the impacts to your employees and understand what your personnel policies are with regard to leave. Some of you follow state policies, but many of you have your own local library or city or county personnel policies. So now's the time to be looking into and understanding what those kinds of policies are. If you are directed to close your public facilities, I encourage you to be thinking about how we can band together to support these kinds of one-on-one services. One thing we haven't talked about today is the fact that as we offer virtual services, there's no need to necessarily limit our services to our specific population that we serve. You know, if somebody's going to be holding a story time via Facebook Live or recording those kinds of materials, I hope we would all agree that we should share information about how Montanans can take part in those kinds of services or take advantage of listening to a recorded book or participating in a recorded story time. So if you're providing those kinds of services and have the means of sharing them via social media or via your websites so that we can take advantage of the resources that we're all creating, please take the time to share that kind of information. Specifically with regard to tools that can help you hold online meetings with your boards, with your book clubs and other kinds of groups, Suzanne will be sharing that information via Wired as well as the web platform that Amelia is maintaining. The partners group is going to be meeting this afternoon to talk about impacts to partner services, including a possible suspension of the courier. And then look for information from me about how to report the status of your library. And then we'll share that up-to-date information with all of you so you know which libraries are open and which libraries are closed. And then we're also looking into more information about expanded services for Montana Library to Go. Look for up-to-date emails and information from Jennifer that can help you share information through the Montana Memory Project, again, as a way to sort of bridge that kind of social isolation.
And just a couple of other things. Gail's wondering if people are finding or ordering a resource for ordering disinfectant wipes and hand sanitizer. She has been finding a lot of empty shelves, and I don't know of any. Jenny, maybe we can.
I don't know of any either, Gail. We've run into the same thing at the state level.
Well, if anybody does find a decent resource for that, please share. And then Connie's suggesting that we all kind of maybe collect a little video and some photos of what we're all doing behind the scenes when this is all over. We might want to be able to share what we've learned and create our own story about our response, which is really a good idea. And then Marin in Fort Benton is asking, is anyone doing open to the public by appointment only? And I think the curbside service is sort of like that. People are calling ahead, and I don't know. Does anybody want to answer Marin's question? Oh, and Kelly is suggesting contacting your local emergency services, Department of Emergency Services and Public Health Department. They actually help the library out with accessing those resources. That might be a good idea, Jenny. There is a list of, sometimes it's hard to find who your emergency services director is. Every county and every tribe has one. Amelia, I'll look that up and get that information to you so we can post it on our Zoho portal.
Thanks, Joe. That's a great point.
And Jody Moore points out that some of the stuff that you can find online is very expensive, and really you don't want to take a resource away from a hospital, but maybe your local. I will say that hospitals often have the surge capacity for some of this, but they're not going to offer to. They have their own needs, so it's probably just a little more important than ours. But let's stay in touch with that. I'm just going to post that Zoho portal one more time in the chat box in case you didn't catch it. Yes, Jenny?
I just said thanks. Thanks for posting it.
Okay.
Other state library staff online, any questions that you're hearing that we didn't discuss? Any other points that you want to make?
This is Amelia. For anyone who's interested in doing virtual story times, I actually just went to a webinar about this from Amigos, and I will be, that link, the PDF resource list, and they have a lot of really good information there about how to do virtual story time, from like a super involved sort of thing to just like a Facebook Live once a week thing where you just read a book to whoever's online. So I'll actually just go ahead and post that PDF link in the chat box here. And I would encourage you to take a look if you are considering doing this. And I will also send out some more information and put it in the Zoho COVID-19 resources for libraries section. There's a lot of different resources out there and a lot of really good things to consider.
So thanks everybody. We're actually past the top of the hour, but we did, man, we've probably never had such an active chat box. And I know that this is continuing. Jenny, do you have any plans for another meeting like this?
I was just thinking about that, Joe. If folks think it would be beneficial, we can always think about finding another time, even if it's just a chance to sort of debrief one another about what things are going on in our communities. We'd be more than happy to host that kind of opportunity. And again, we'll certainly be sharing additional information that we get from the state level. The COVID-19.md.gov has all of the links to the most up-to-date information as it gets announced from the state. So keep checking back there as well.
And Jenny, is MLA being canceled? Are we going to have any role in helping mitigate the loss of all that continuing education opportunity?
That's a really great question, Joe. I know I heard from attendees at the South Central Federation meeting over the weekend that they were concerned about the loss. My understanding, and this is not been confirmed, but MLA has had offers for hosting a virtual conference free of charge, and I know that the board is going to be looking into that kind of option, and I've said that the state library is absolutely happy to participate in any kind of online virtual conference options, even if it's just offering the planned sessions that were planned for MLA in an online environment. Again, this is information that has not yet been confirmed, and I know you'll see more information on Wired about that in the coming days and weeks.
So it sounds like there's a lot of interest in doing a follow-up session. So Jenny and I will get together and schedule something and post that to Wired as well. And then from Martha out in Kalispell, could we get an extra year added to our CE time window or some extra time? I know I was planning to finish mine after MLA, not an emergency, just something to consider. I can answer this question. You actually, the way the CE works is that when your certificate expires, like for our directors that have a requirement, it's not required for Martha, but you are granted an extension, but then you have shorter amount of time to renew. So to change that rule and give people more time to renew, Jenny, we would have to talk to the commission about that, right?
Yeah, we would, and I think we'll want to really evaluate the impact. We don't yet know how long this situation is going to last, and so we don't yet know the impact it will have on librarians' abilities to collect CE. But the more website chats we hold, the more CE you can get.
Yes.
There's that motivation.
Well, we'll definitely, thank you for bringing it up, Martha. I don't think that's something's been on our radar, and something that I will certainly keep an eye on, and we can talk about that at least as an option. And certainly if anybody else is experiencing because of the Library Association conference being canceled, an undue burden, please let us know, because we'll take that into consideration. And then Valerie also says, I've been wondering how the cancellation of MLA will affect us financially. We used Federation funds to pay for registration. Jenny, are you?
Sure, I'm happy to answer that question. I believe that MLA is going to be offering a refund of your registration fees. If they don't worry about it. You count your registration fees towards CE regardless. If they do offer you a refund, you have the ability to use those monies to pay for whether it's continuing education or something else within the categories of your Federation plan of service.
So you can reallocate that funding. There's no plan to like carry over funding. There's no way to do that.
We cannot carry over the funding because it's already been dispersed to the libraries.
What about if we donate that refund back to MLA, was the follow-up question.
I would make sure that you have the ability to make a donation that's allowed for within your local accounting policies and processes. You know, we can't donate state funds to private entities, so that would be my one caution. But again, at this point, the monies have been allocated to libraries and they need to be used for the purposes that are described in your plans of service.
But Jenny, what if MLA offered the online sessions, but at a fee? That would be appropriate.
That would certainly be appropriate, Joe. Yep, absolutely.
So if you're a part of the MLA planning, that might be something to suggest.
One of the other things that we were brainstorming about in the Federation meeting over the weekend was whether or not there's a way to hold the Kate's auction online. And I know that there are apps that allow you to facilitate online auctions. So for those of us that already have our Kate's baskets and are interested in maybe continuing a fundraiser for the Kate Scholarship Program, we're happy to help think about that too.
So I'm not seeing any more comments in the chat box, and just want to thank our for being here today. And I hopefully got a recording. This is actually my very first Zoom recording, so fingers crossed on that. And I'll get that posted as soon as possible. It takes me about an hour to do that, and then we'll onto our Vimeo channel, and then I'll send out the links from our chat and the link to the recording to Wired this afternoon. And we will get another meeting scheduled.
Thank you all for your great questions and great participation. Again, let's really lean into one another during this time. We have a lot to learn and a lot of resources and experiences to share with one another.